On this episode of Tips from the Top Floor, we'll do an almost religious deep dive on healing. Well, healing things in photos. This episode is brought to you by DiscoverTheTopFloor.com. Join us in 2019 on a ship to photograph amazing Arctic fjord landscapes and the Northern Lights up in Norway, or come with us in June 2019 on our Silk Road tour to Kyrgyzstan, a photo tour along the old caravan route, home to snow leopards and lynx with its amazing landscapes and horse riders. Or join us in October 2019 for a breathtaking fall colors photo tour to Transylvania, the home of Count Dracula. Find out more at discoverthetopfloor.com. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 830 for Thursday, July the 5th, 2018.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, all right, from the top floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, how have you been? An early morning again for me to record this, but hey, to be honest, right now it's better to record early in the morning because the weather here is just crazy. It's hot. My preference for going to colder climates because I don't know. I'm a radiator. I don't fare well in the hot climates. I noticed that when a few years ago I was in Ethiopia. And we did this hike up the mountain we started in the morning, but it was in the middle of the desert in a lava field, hiking up for 3-4 hours up the hill, up to that volcano. And the temperature, let me see, how much is that in Celsius? 40 Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, 40 Celsius. That was the outside temperature. And if your body temperature is 37 Celsius, which in Fahrenheit, I'm not good in these conversions, which in Fahrenheit is 98.6, kind of normal body temperature. If the outside is hotter, you can't just stop moving and then you will cool down. No, you generate heat when you walk up the hill and you have to do something about that. And out in the desert, well, there's no air condition. There's only water that you can pour over yourself and drink and sweat. And yeah, it was difficult. I'm so happy I did it, but that was that was quite a challenge for me, as opposed to hiking somewhere or being somewhere in a colder climate, and then if you get too hot, you just stop and you automatically cool down. So that's, I just like this more, which is why I'm going back to the Arctic in later this year and in February next year. And I think the Lofoten tour this year is sold out, if I'm not mistaken, but there are still a few seats, a few spots available on the February tour on the ship in Lofoten. It's all at discoverthetopfloor.com. Anyway, I didn't want to turn this into an ad. Okay, last week I talked about the Healing tool. And the Healing tool is a tool, I mean, every photo editor has that. I'm using Lightroom here as an example because that's still what I use. Every editor has that, and it is a powerful tool. It is a powerful tool, and when I talked about that tool last episode, it was one of those things where all of a sudden a little storm came in. People started mailing me and sending me feedback on other channels. Just to let me know a few things that I didn't cover, but I did never intend to make this like a full-fledged tutorial for how to use the healing brush or cloning brush tool. But that might change after this voicemail.
Hi, Chris. Hey, this is Tom from the Northland of Minnesota. I wanted to follow up on one of the questions that you dealt with in today's podcast, having to do with Lightroom and the clone/healing tool. One thing that wasn't mentioned was that you can actually move that selection that Lightroom automatically made, like when it chooses the forest to replace or heal a blemish on somebody's face. You can actually click on that, drag it, and move it. And as you're moving it, the spot that you're trying to heal starts reflecting the new selection, and then you can move it around and put it in a place where it looks more pleasing. That wasn't mentioned during the podcast, and I'm guessing that the questioner knew that, but the fact that they were trying to redo an auto selection made me wonder if they didn't know that. I guess from my perspective, if Lightroom makes a wonky selection, I'm not going to think that if I do it again, it's going to make a better selection. I'm guessing it's getting confused by something in the original spot that's trying to be healed and picking something that makes no sense whatsoever. So anyway, I just thought I'd call in and follow up on that. The other thing I've found for things like spots and dust spots and such in the sky, I've found the setting it on healing rather than cloning is a lot more effective. I'm not quite sure why, but it does a lot better job if I have it on healing rather than cloning. So anyway, just a couple of follow-up items that I thought folks might be interested in. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, you know, when I listened back to last week's episode, it really shows that I'm so deep in the trenches that I sometimes don't really think about these very simple things. So that's what I need you guys for. That's what I need the audience for, to catch me out on these. And yeah, so Tom, wonderful point, really good point. And while I don't do like a lot of tutorials and things here on the show, I'll make an exception. Let's crank this up to 11. Let's go and do a deep dive on the Lightroom healing tool or cloning tool. And by the way, that it's kind of similar in other apps, so that might be a template for you if you work with something other than Lightroom, but that's still my digital asset manager, editor of choice when it comes to photography. So that's why I'm using that here. And so let me give you Healing Superpowers. Why would I use the healing tool? Why would anyone use that tool? Well, it's almost always because we want to remove something from the picture. There might be a blemish on a portrait, or there might be a lamppost in the back that doesn't belong there, or some trash on the street that doesn't work for our composition. You name it. We've all been in those situations where a photo was a good photo, but there was something that we needed to get rid of in that frame to make it just that little bit better. And by the way, we're making art here, so from an ethical point of view, I think that's not a problem. If you're a journalist, a photojournalist, hey, no cloning allowed whatsoever. But in the capacity that we use photography here, or that I use photography, I'm not against using stuff like that. So there's a blemish, there's a lamppost, there's a tree that doesn't belong there, or a garbage bag or something. A second use for the cloning tool would also be to duplicate something in the picture. Again, maybe you want to fill in a hole in a cloud that looks weird, or you want to fix, let's say you have a meadow with flowers as an example, but there's one hole in there and you want to fill that with some of the other flowers from the shot. That will be a use for that tool. But basically, both are the same, right? This tool lets you take part of a picture and copy it over to another part of the picture to cover up something or to duplicate something. And you call up the clone tool in Lightroom with the Q key. That's the shortcut. Worth learning because it's really a quick fix often from anywhere. Be it you're in the library, you're in the develop module, just hit Q and you'll end up with the clone tool. And by the way, you can play along while try it out right now. You'll see in the right sidebar, and by the way, if that's not showing, hit tab if you don't see that. It's right under the histogram. The little icon, it's a little circle with a little arrow pointing out. And there are several things in that little dialog under it that you can change. There's a size, which makes the size of the point bigger or smaller. And by the way, that also is on your mouse wheel. So mouse wheel up and down changes the size. There's a feather setting, which is the softness of the edge. And by the way, that you can change by holding the Shift key down and using the mouse wheel. And then there's opacity. And those should kind of be fairly self-explanatory. But then there is also this little button at the top that is, or this little choice at the top that is clone versus heal. There are two settings you can set that tool to, the cloning and the healing. And well, first, there's always a source and a destination point in that tool. So it takes it from a specific point and it clones it to another point in the picture. And the clone tool is kind of the one that's easiest to understand because it just makes a copy of the source area. And again, if you have the feather tool or the feather setting cranked down, then it's a hard-edged selection. And if you have the feather cranked up, then that is a soft selection. But often you'll find that clone will not work because sources has different brightness or a different color from the destination. And that subtle difference, if you try to clone, using the clone setting to clone out a spot in the sky, which by the way is often the case because you might have a little dust bunny on your sensor, try the clone tool and you will see how drastically different that brightness will be, even just a bit over on the same sky. A subtle difference will just be very obvious to everyone who looks at the photo. And that's where the heal tool comes in. Because heal is very similar to the clone tool. It makes a copy, it uses that source and copies it over to the destination. But it will also look at the color and brightness of the destination and then adapt that spot to the destination. Again, example is a dust spot on the sensor, shows in the sky, and it looks weird, and you clone part of the sky from next to it over that dust spot, and then it's invisible. And usually that's like one click. Bam, done. And by the way, you can move the spots. Yeah, that's what Tom said. You can move those spots. You can move the source. So if you find that that source selection didn't work well, you can just grab that with the mouse and move it around. And you can also move the destination spot. So if you didn't make a good choice for the destination spot, yeah, move it around. And that's really helpful if Lightroom's auto selection gets it wrong. It's no biggie. And you can even move it later. So you come back to that same picture a week later and you notice that I didn't make a good selection for that spot. Just move it around. It's entirely non-destructive. Even years later, go back and change your settings. And you can also fine-tune the spot with your keyboard. That's often very helpful. If you need to move that selection up and down, just one pixel, click the source or the target spot, highlight it, and then move it with the cursor keys up, down, left, right. And it'll just move a tiny little bit over. If the clone spots are in the way, like if you have several clone spots and you don't want to see them, or if you want to preview what it's going to look like without those selections on your screen, you can hide them with the H key. That's also the key you press when you want to work on a selection later on and you don't see it. H is the hide key and the unhide key, and you can get those selection edges out of the way and get a cleaner interface. And sometimes if I have a lot of stuff to clone, a lot of spots to fix, I do this in hidden mode, so I can instantly see if the tool did a good job. You can also change the size of the selection with the mouse wheel. I said that earlier, and the edge softness with Shift mouse wheel, just for a quick repeat here. But what if the source isn't round or the destination that you want to clone to is not round? Let's say you scanned film, which happens a lot here in this household. Scan a piece of film and then there's a squiggly cat hair on the scan. That does also happen here in this household. And you want to clone out that weird shape. Well, you could make the spot so big that it covers the cat hair, but that would kind of be wasteful. There's a lot of space around that doesn't need cloning. And the solution is that the source and the target don't have to be spots. You can paint a shape. So just instead of clicking on that picture, keep the mouse button pressed and paint a shape. And that's very helpful. But now, okay, let me supercharge this even more for you. Let's assume you want to clone out some electrical wire in the sky. And that means you'd have to paint a long straight line, which is not easy. Especially if it's really thin, it's not easy to do. But let me try to blow your mind, because for straight lines, there is an even easier solution. It's an easier way to make the shape a straight line by doing this. First, you click the beginning of that line. Just click, make a round selection. And then move the mouse to the end of that line and shift click. And that will instantly make a line-shaped selection. Yeah, try it. When I found that out, that blew my mind, because it made things so much easier. Again, straight line, click on the beginning of the line, and then shift click on the end of the line, and you have an instant straight line painted with the clone tool. And again, if you can't see that selection, use the H key, that will help. Now, again, cloning and healing are different. The clone is a copy, the healing adjusts. But let me try to blow your mind once more. Let's say you have dust bunnies in the sky, and depending on if they're big and what aperture you shot on, they might not be easy to see, right? You have the dust spots on the sensor often do not show as a hard-edged spot. They often show as a kind of a diffuse cloud of sorts, a darkish little spot, but sometimes they are not that easy to spot. Here's a solution for that as well. It's called Visualize Spots. There is a checkbox under the picture. If you're in the clone tool, and if you do not see that checkbox, it's in a toolbar, and that you can hide and show with the T key. So this is the second shortcut. H for hiding the actual selections, and T for hiding and showing the toolbar. And there's this little Visualize Spots checkbox. Go ahead and enable that. And now your picture will look very different. It turns into a black and white picture, and there's some sort of an edge detection algorithm. It looks almost like Terminator vision, but you'll see the spots in the sky right away. Not much guesswork. You can change its strength with a little slider next to the checkbox. And you can even clone in this view. So if you have dust spots on your sensor, hit that. Well, enable the Visualize Spots feature, which, by the way, also has its own shortcut. It's the A key. So there you have it. 3 important keys to help you. The H key to hide the selection or show it. The T key to hide and show the toolbar. And the A key to enable Visualize Spots. And then a few shortcuts that hopefully will make your work with the cloning and healing brush just a little bit more powerful. And that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. Thanks everyone for listening. And by the way, thank you all for the support. A quick word on the topic of sponsorship, and especially on the topic of you, the community, being sponsors of what I do here. I can't emphasize enough how important support from the listeners is for podcasters in general, and of course for this show, because receiving support from you means more freedom for me, and that is freedom from having to take other paid work, and that means freedom to pour more time and effort into making this show. It means having the freedom to spend more time preparing the show and to schedule guests and to edit the show better, because there's more than what you hear. This thing is a bit of a machinery, feeding in information on one side and churning it into an episode, and then editing the episode and putting it out, and just having more time to prepare for the show will just make this show much better. And also, of course, later in the edit, and because everything I do, recording this podcast is pretty high on my list of things I love doing, and your support helps me make more of this. And that's why at the end of the episode, at the end of every episode, I thank you for your support and extension. I thank you for the freedom that you give me. You guys are awesome. Oh, and if you're looking for ways to support the show, go to tfttf.com/support. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, sound partner and Hans-Peter Kagerud, publishing and Slack challenges by Release Pixie, Matt Refsiter Armstead, Slack invitations by Chief Invitation Officer, CIO Rusty Russ. The link to get on the Slack is in the show notes. My name is Chris Marquardt. You'll find me on social media at Chris MARQUARDT. Go out and take amazing photos. Be nice to each other. And happy shooting. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 834, Thursday when... This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 834... This is Tips from the Top Floor... This is Tips from the Top Floor... Dang it. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 834, Thursday... This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 800, Thursday for... This is Tips from the Top Floor, 834... One more time. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 834, Thursday, July the 5th, 2018.